The exploration vessel Horizon drifted slowly into orbit around the blue-green planet. Captain Jack Morgan stood on the bridge, hands clasped behind his back, as he studied the world below. After 3 years in deep space, they had finally found signs of advanced life. Sensors confirm artificial structures on the surface, said Science Officer Paul Winters, his eyes fixed on the glowing display. And definitely technology signatures. We're not alone out here anymore. Jack nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. Humanity's first contact with an alien civilization would happen under his command. Any response to our greeting message? He asked. Communications specialist Lisa Trent adjusted her earpiece. Yes, sir. They call themselves the Vexari. They're sending coordinates for a landing zone, and they seem cautious but not hostile. Prepare the shuttle, Jack ordered. First contact team will include myself, Trent, Winters, Dr. Miller, and Thompson for security. Within an hour, the sleek shuttlecraft descended through wispy clouds. The landing zone was a flat plain surrounded by strange spiral structures that gleamed in the planet's reddish sunlight. Atmosphere readings, Jack asked as they approached the surface. Dr. Diane Miller checked her instruments. Breathable, mostly nitrogen and oxygen, but with high concentrations of unusual compounds. Our filters should handle it, but I recommend we keep helmets on initially. The shuttle settled onto the dusty surface with a soft thud. Through the viewport, they could see tall, slender figures approaching. They walked with a graceful, swaying motion. Reptilian, whispered Paul Winters, adjusting his scanner. Bictal, probably warm-blooded despite the scales. Fascinating. Security Officer Greg Thompson checked his non-lethal sidearm. Remember standard first contact protocol. No sudden movements. Jack nodded and moved toward the airlock. Let's make history. The team stepped out onto the alien soil, the first humans to set foot on a world with intelligent life. The Vexari stopped about 10 meters away. They stood nearly 7 feet tall, with iridescent scales in patterns of blue and green. Their faces were narrow with vertical pupils and large golden eyes. One stepped forward, wearing elaborate decorations that suggested authority. I am Sizek, ambassador of the Vexari Collective, the translator in their helmets conveyed. The voice had an odd musical quality. You are the first visitors to reach our world in many cycles. Captain Jack Morgan of the Earth exploration vessel Horizon. Jack replied with a slight bow. We come in peace and friendship. Sezek's head tilted at an angle. Peace is valued by the collective. Your journey must have been long. The initial exchange went smoothly, but Lisa Trent noticed something odd about the Vexari body language. They seemed to be studying the humans with unusual intensity, especially their breathing apparatus. The filters in our helmets protect us from unfamiliar elements in your atmosphere, Dr. Miller explained when Sezek inquired about their equipment. A standard precaution when visiting new environments. Of course, Sezek replied. Many species find our world challenging. As they walked toward a nearby structure, Paul Winters discreetly checked his scanner. Captain, he murmured over the private comm channel, I'm getting unusually high toxin readings in the air and soil. Nothing immediately dangerous, but this environment would be lethal to most Earth life forms without protection. Jack acknowledged with a slight nod, making a mental note of this information. We have prepared a welcome ceremony, Sezek announced. Tonight, we will host a formal diplomatic dinner to establish relations between our peoples. We would be honored, Jack replied. As they entered the spiral structure, Lisa caught fragments of conversation between two Vexari guards. Different from the others. Perhaps they will not. Sezek believes they will prove susceptible. She filed this away, unsure of its meaning, but feeling a growing sense of unease. The Vexari led them through luminescent corridors to a chamber where other aliens waited, all watching the humans with those same intense golden eyes. Welcome to Vexari, Sezek said, mandibles clicking softly. We have much to learn about each other. Jack smiled diplomatically. unaware that their hosts were already planning something beyond a simple dinner. The diplomatic dinner began as the twin moons of the Vexari homeworld rose in the purple evening sky. The humans sat at a long crystal table across from their scaly hosts. Captain Jack Morgan had allowed his team to remove their helmets after Dr. Miller's tests confirmed the filtered air in the dining chamber was safe to breathe. "Your vessel traveled far to reach us," said Sezak, the Vexari ambassador. His scaled fingers tapped a rhythm on the table. "Few species venture so deep into space." "Exploration is in our nature," Jack replied. "We're honored to be the first humans to meet your people." Sezak's vertical pupils narrowed slightly. "Indeed, each species has unique attributes." The servers brought out platters of strange food. The Vexari portions contained glittering minerals and crystals that looked more like rocks than food. The human plates held synthesized proteins that Dr. Miller had approved as safe. Engineer Amy Garcia leaned toward Paul Winters. "They eat rocks," she whispered. "Silicon-based biochemistry," Paul replied quietly. "Fascinating." A tall Vexari approached Amy, extending a three-fingered hand toward her face in what appeared to be a greeting. She instinctively pulled back, not wanting the strange claws near her eyes. The room fell silent. The Vexari's neck frills expanded in what they had learned was a sign of anger or distress. "Your crew member refuses the greeting of Elder Kren," Sezak said, his voice suddenly cold. "This is a grave insult." Jack stepped in quickly. "Please forgive us. We're still learning your customs." Amy meant no disrespect. "The greeting acknowledges the other's right to see your truths," Sezak explained stiffly. "Refusing suggests deception." Amy stood and bowed deeply. "I apologize, Elder Kren. I wasn't aware of the meaning." The elder's frills slowly relaxed, but Greg Thompson noticed the guards around the room had moved closer, hands resting on what looked like weapons. Dr. Miller was studying her scanner under the table. "Jack," she whispered when Sezak was distracted. "These minerals they're eating would be extremely toxic to us. Some contain heavy metals and radioactive elements." Jack nodded slightly, adding this to the growing list of concerns. Lisa Trent, sitting near two Vexari scientists, activated the translator in her ear to maximum sensitivity. She caught fragments of their quiet conversation. "Respiratory system like the others. Yet they show no signs. Perhaps longer exposure required. Separate them for further testing." When the main course ended, Sezak rose from his seat. "To honor our new friends, we have arranged cultural exchange activities. Each of you will experience a different aspect of Vexari life." "We prefer to stay together," Jack said carefully. "Impossible," Sezak replied smoothly. "Each activity is designed for individual participation. Surely humans are not afraid to learn alone." It was a challenge Jack couldn't refuse without appearing weak. "Of course not. We look forward to learning more about your culture." The team exchanged worried glances as Vexari guides approached each of them. Jack was led toward what looked like a government building, while Lisa was directed to a communications center. Paul followed a scientist toward a structure filled with glowing specimens. Greg was guided toward what appeared to be a military facility, while Amy was shown to their power generation complex. Dr. Miller was escorted to what seemed to be a medical facility. As they left, Jack activated his emergency communicator. "Stay alert. Report anything unusual immediately. We meet back at the shuttle in 3 hours regardless of what our hosts say." The team members nodded subtly before being led in different directions. Behind them, Sezak watched with unblinking eyes as the humans separated. He turned to Elder Kren and spoke in their native tongue, which the translators couldn't process. "They are resilient, but all species have weaknesses. Prepare the Zethra for tomorrow's ceremony. If they survive the night in our environment, the sacred liquid will reveal their true nature." Elder Kren's scales rippled with anticipation. "And if they prove as vulnerable as the others?" Sezak's mouth opened in what might have been a smile, revealing rows of needle-like teeth. "Then the collective expands. as it always has. Captain Jack Morgan followed his Vexari guide through long, winding corridors. The walls pulsed with a faint blue light that made shadows dance strangely. Jack maintained a friendly expression, but his senses were on high alert. The guide stopped at a viewing platform overlooking a massive chamber filled with holographic displays. Jack recognized star charts and planetary systems. "Our historical archive," the guide explained. "We document all civilizations we encounter." Jack studied the displays, noting dozens of planetary systems marked with unfamiliar symbols. "You've met many species then." "Hundreds over thousands of cycles," the guide replied, "though few remain in regular contact." The guide moved away to speak with another Vexari. Jack used the opportunity to examine the displays more closely. He noticed a pattern. Many systems were marked with a symbol that looked like a circle with a line through it. Suddenly, voices drifted from a nearby room. Jack moved closer to listen. "The humans show remarkable resilience to our environment," said a voice he recognized as Syzex. "Previous species began showing symptoms within hours," another voice replied. "Perhaps we need a stronger cleansing solution." Jack's blood ran cold. Cleansing solution. "The Zethra ceremony will be definitive," Syzex stated. "No species has survived direct ingestion. And if they somehow resist, impossible. But we have other methods if needed." Jack stepped away silently, his mind racing. He needed to warn his crew. Meanwhile, Paul Winters was being shown specimens of what the Vexari claimed were microorganisms from their world. But Paul's trained eye recognized something else entirely. "These are cellular samples from different species," he said, looking at a glowing blue sample. The Vexari scientist froze momentarily. "You are observant." "Yes, we study all life forms we encounter." Paul moved along the display cases, noticing labels with dates and strange symbols. His universal translator struggled with the text, but he managed to decipher enough to realize these were records of previous contacts with alien species. "What happened to these species?" Paul asked casually. "Their biology was incompatible with our world," the scientist answered. "A regrettable but natural outcome." Paul noticed all the records ended shortly after contact was established. No long-term relations, just initial meetings, then nothing. Across the compound, Lisa Trent was seated at a communication console, supposedly to learn about Vexari transmission technology. Instead, she managed to access their communication logs. Her translator worked overtime decoding fragments. "Previous diplomatic mission terminated after exposure. Biological vulnerability confirmed in species 127. Expansion into Sector 19 ready once cleansing complete." Lisa activated her emergency communicator discreetly. "Captain, I'm finding evidence of a pattern. They meet species, then those species disappear." In the power facility, Amy Garcia was examining the Vexari energy systems when she discovered something unexpected. Hidden behind the main generators were weapons platforms, dozens of them, powered down but ready for deployment. "What are these for?" she asked her guide innocently. "Defense systems," the guide replied smoothly. "All civilizations need protection." But Amy had worked on enough military hardware to recognize offensive capabilities when she saw them. These weren't defensive, they were designed for planetary bombardment. Greg Thompson was having his own disturbing experience at the military facility. His guide proudly showed him what was described as training exercises, but looked more like invasion preparations. Soldiers practiced deployment sequences for unfamiliar worlds. "Is your species preparing for war?" Greg asked directly. "The collective must always be ready to expand," his guide answered with unsettling honesty. Dr. Miller made perhaps the most troubling discovery of all. In the medical facility, she found records of biological experiments on various species. Each file documented the same progression: initial contact, exposure to Vexari environment, biological failure, and extinction. The Vexari weren't just meeting new species, they were systematically eliminating them. As the 3-hour mark approached, the team reassembled at the shuttle. each bringing pieces of the disturbing puzzle. "They're expansionists," Jack said gravely when they were safely inside with communications blocked. "They eliminate potential rivals through biological means. Their primary weapon is their own biochemistry," Dr. Miller added. "They expose species to toxins that are natural to them but lethal to others. And tomorrow," Lisa said, "they plan to use something called Zethra on us." The mood inside the shuttle was tense as the crew discussed their options. Outside, the strange alien landscape glowed under the light of twin moons. They had 1 hour before they were expected to return to their quarters in the Vexari compound. "We could leave now," Greg suggested, checking his weapon. "Get back to the horizon and warn Earth about these predators. And start an interstellar incident, or worse, a war." Jack shook his head. "We need more concrete evidence." Dr. Miller held up her medical scanner. "I've been analyzing the Vexari biochemistry. Their bodies naturally produce compounds that would be lethal neurotoxins to most carbon-based life. They literally breathe, eat, and drink poison. And they use it as a weapon," Lisa added. "My guess is this Zethra ceremony tomorrow is their way of eliminating us without seeming hostile." Paul nodded. "Classic predator strategy. Make the prey come to you willingly." "Can we fake drinking whatever they offer us?" Amy asked. "They'll be watching too closely," Jack replied. "And refusing would confirm their suspicions that we know something." Their discussion was interrupted by a soft chime. A message appeared on their communication screen. An invitation to a special ceremonial banquet the following day to honor their new alliance. "Right on schedule," Jack said grimly. "The trap is set." Dr. Miller continued studying her readings. "I managed to get some scans of a storage room in the medical facility. They're preparing something with a unique chemical signature. It appears to be a blue liquid with neural disruptors and molecular destabilizers." "Can we take antidotes?" Greg asked. "Not without knowing the exact compound," Dr. Miller replied. "And even if we could, they would detect foreign substances in our blood. They're monitoring us constantly." "So we're damned if we do, damned if we don't," Jack said, rubbing his forehead. "Wait," Lisa interrupted. "I discovered something else in their communication logs. There are references to resistance factions, Vexari who oppose the expansion policy. They might help us." "Too risky to approach them," Jack decided. "We don't know who to trust." A soft alert from Paul's scanner drew their attention. "Incoming. Vexari approaching the shuttle." Jack quickly stood. "Upload everything we found to the ship's secure database. If something happens to us, at least the Horizon will have the information." He looked at each crew member. "We attend the ceremony tomorrow, but stay alert for any opportunity. Our priority is getting this information back to Earth." The crew nodded solemnly as the data transferred to the ship's computers. Moments later, a firm knock sounded on the shuttle door. Jack opened it to find Sezek standing outside, flanked by guards. "Captain Morgan," Sezek said smoothly. "I trust your explorations were informative." "Very," Jack replied with a forced smile. "Your civilization is impressive. We have prepared special quarters for your overnight stay." Sezek continued. "The ceremonial banquet tomorrow is our highest honor. No visiting dignitaries have ever received such recognition." Because they never survived long enough, Jack thought, but kept his expression neutral. "We're honored." The team followed Sezek back to the compound, each lost in their own thoughts. The quarters were luxurious by any standard. Large rooms with comfortable sleeping platforms and stunning views of the alien landscape. But Greg quickly discovered the doors locked from the outside once closed, and Amy found tiny monitoring devices hidden throughout the rooms. As night fell on the alien world, Jack stood at the window of his room, watching the strange constellations above. On his bed lay a ceremonial robe left by the Vexari for tomorrow's event. A note explained that all guests would wear these garments to symbolize unity. Jack examined the robe carefully. The fabric contained trace amounts of the same toxins present in the Vexari atmosphere. Prolonged skin contact would likely cause mild poisoning, weakening them before the main event. He set the robe aside and contacted his team through their secure channel. Don't wear the robes until the last possible moment. And remember, tomorrow we're either going to make history or become it. Morning came with an eerie silence. The human crew, dressed in their own uniforms rather than the poisoned robes, were escorted by armed Vexari guards to a massive circular chamber. Jack had instructed everyone to wear their uniforms until the last possible moment, only donning the ceremonial robes when directly ordered. The ceremonial chamber took their breath away despite their dire situation. Crystal columns stretched toward a domed ceiling that displayed a real-time view of space above the planet. The floor was polished stone with strange glowing patterns that shifted and moved like living things. In the center stood a round table with 13 seats, 6 for the humans and 7 for the Vexari leadership. Behind each chair stood a Vexari guard at rigid attention. "Please, change into your ceremonial garments," Sezek instructed as they entered. His tone made it clear this was not a request. With reluctant glances at Jack, the crew slowly put on the robes over their uniforms, minimizing skin contact as much as possible. "Now we may begin," Sezek announced once they were seated. This sacred ceremony has not been performed with outsiders for many cycles. Jack noticed something unusual about the chairs. Each had subtle restraints built into the armrests, currently inactive but ready to deploy. A quick look at Greg confirmed he had noticed too. Elder Kren entered the chamber, followed by 6 Vexari officials in elaborate dress. The tension in the room thickened as they took their seats, eyes fixed on the humans with predatory intensity. "Before we share the sacred Zethra," Sezek explained, "we must understand one another fully. Our scientists have studied your biology with great interest, as ours have studied yours," Dr. Miller replied evenly. Sezek's mouth twitched in what might have been amusement. "And what have you learned about us, Doctor?" "That your biochemistry is unique," she answered carefully. "Your bodies process elements that would be toxic to most life forms." "Indeed," Elder Kren interjected. "Our evolution followed a different path than most carbon-based species. We are exceptional." A solemn procession of Vexari entered the chamber, carrying an ornate container that glowed with an inner blue light. The crew exchanged nervous glances as the container was placed in the center of the table. "The Zethra is our most sacred substance," Sezek announced. "It flows through the core of our world and gives us strength. To share it is to share our essence with those we consider worthy. Or to poison those you consider threats," Jack thought. The container opened with a soft hiss, revealing a luminous blue liquid that seemed to move with a life of its own. The scent was strangely sweet, with an underlying sharpness that made their eyes water. Dr. Miller discreetly activated her scanner under the table. Her eyes widened at the readings, and she sent a silent message to Jack's communicator. Concentrated neurotoxins, fatal to most life forms within seconds. Ornate crystal glasses were placed before each person. The Vexari server poured the glowing blue liquid with ceremonial precision, filling each glass exactly halfway. Jack noted the guards had moved closer, hands resting on their weapons. The gentle hum of energy suggested the chair restraints were ready to activate. He shifted slightly, preparing to move quickly if needed. "As our honored guests," Sezek said with a predatory smile, "humans shall drink first." The room fell into complete silence. Every Vexari eye focused on the humans with unwavering attention. "Captain," Lisa whispered, "the exits are blocked." Jack's mind raced through options, none of them good. Refusing would confirm their suspicions and likely trigger immediate hostility. Pretending to drink would be impossible with so many watching eyes. Then, from the end of the table, came an unexpected sound. Maintenance technician Hank Peterson, who had joined them for the ceremony but remained quiet until now, cleared his throat. "Well, this looks fancy," Hank said cheerfully, apparently oblivious to the tension. Before anyone could stop him, he picked up his glass and raised it in a toast. "Back home, we say bottoms up." And with that, Hank tilted his head back and swallowed the entire contents of his glass in one gulp. The Vexeri froze, their golden eyes wide with anticipation as they waited for the inevitable. Time seemed to freeze in the ceremonial chamber. Every Vexeri eye was fixed on Hank Peterson. The maintenance technician set his empty glass down on the table with a satisfied clink. Hank smacked his lips and ran his tongue over his teeth thoughtfully. "That's pretty good," he said, breaking the silence. "Tastes like blueberries with a kick. Got any more?" The Vexeri remained motionless, vertical pupils dilated in what looked like shock. According to their extensive records, no species had ever survived ingesting pure Zethra. The neurotoxin should have caused immediate paralysis, followed by respiratory failure within seconds. Yet here was this human, not only alive but asking for seconds. Captain Jack Morgan seized the moment of confusion. He reached for his own glass and raised it in a toast. "To new friendships," he said, maintaining eye contact with Sizek as he drank the entire contents. The blue liquid burned slightly going down, like strong alcohol mixed with spicy peppers, but otherwise seemed harmless. Jack set his glass down and smiled. "Excellent. Very refreshing." One by one, the other crew members followed suit, each drinking their Zethra completely. Lisa made a face at the strong taste but recovered quickly. Dr. Miller drank hers slowly, clearly analyzing the sensations for later study. Paul and Greg finished theirs in quick gulps, while Amy sipped hers carefully. "Indeed," Amy said after finishing, "it has an interesting aftertaste, almost like mint and chili peppers." The Vexeri leadership remained frozen in disbelief. Sizek's scales had lost their vibrant color, turning a pale blue-gray. Elder Kren's mouth hung open, revealing rows of needle-like teeth. "Impossible," one of the Vexeri scientists whispered, breaking protocol. "No species has ever." "Is something wrong?" Jack asked innocently. "Should we not have finished it all?" Sizek finally found his voice, though it trembled slightly. "How are you?" "Unaffected. The Zethra contains compounds that should be incompatible with carbon-based life." Dr. Miller spoke up, her scientific curiosity evident. "Our species has evolved on a planet with extreme environmental diversity. Perhaps we've developed unique enzymes that neutralize certain compounds." Jack noticed the Vexeri guards exchanging confused looks, their posture less certain. The power dynamic had shifted dramatically in mere moments. "It seems," Jack said carefully, "that humans and Vexeri have more in common than expected. We both evolved to handle substances that others find lethal." Elder Kren leaned forward, his earlier arrogance replaced by scientific curiosity. "In thousands of cycles, across hundreds of species, none have survived the Zethra ceremony. You are unique." Hank Peterson, oblivious to the significance of what had happened, reached for the container in the center of the table. "Mind if I have another? Been a while since I tasted something new." Sizek made a gesture, and a guard moved the container away. "The ceremony allows only one serving," he said quickly. Jack used their confusion to take control of the situation. "Since we've shared your sacred substance, perhaps now we can discuss a true alliance between our peoples. As equals." The word equals hung in the air. The Vexeri leadership exchanged glances, having a silent conversation in subtle movements of their head frills and scales. "Of course," Sizek finally said, though Jack detected uncertainty in his voice. "But first, we must understand how your biology differs from other species." "A scientific exchange would benefit both our peoples," Dr. Miller agreed, "though we would need to contact our ship to access our full biological databases." Jack saw the opening and pressed further. "In fact, our ship's captain will be concerned if we don't report in soon. Perhaps we should invite representatives from the horizon to join these discussions." Sizek hesitated, then nodded slowly. "A reasonable request." As the Vexeri dignitaries began urgent whispered conversations among themselves, Lisa leaned close to Jack's ear. "They're recalculating everything," she whispered. "Their entire conquest strategy just failed for the first time." Jack nodded slightly. And that gives us leverage. He raised his voice to address Sizak again. Now, about those other species you've encountered. The next day brought dramatic changes to the diplomatic situation. The humans were no longer treated as potential victims, but as honored guests, or perhaps as threats to be carefully managed. Either way, the power balance had shifted significantly. Jack and his crew sat in a large meeting room aboard the Horizon. They had insisted on bringing the negotiations to their ship, a request the Vexari reluctantly granted. Sizak and 3 other Vexari representatives sat across from them, looking distinctly uncomfortable in the human environment. Our scientists are fascinated by your immunity to compounds that have proven universally toxic to all other species we've encountered, Sizak said, his scales shimmering with subtle colors that betrayed his agitation. We're equally interested in your biology, Dr. Miller replied. The ability to metabolize heavy metals and radioactive elements is unique in our experience. While the discussion of biological exchange continued, Lisa Trent worked quietly at a communication console in a corner. She had discovered something important in the Vexari transmission frequencies and was attempting to establish contact. You mentioned other species you've encountered, Jack said, keeping Sizak's attention away from Lisa's activities. We'd be interested in establishing contact with them as well. Sizak's neck frills flattened slightly. Unfortunately, most species found our world incompatible with their continued existence. You mean they died from exposure to your environment? Paul clarified bluntly. Were there any survivors? Before Sizak could answer, Greg Thompson returned to the meeting room with startling news. Captain, we've detected energy signatures from hidden facilities on the far side of the planet. They appear to be containment centers. Jack fixed Sizak with a hard stare. Containment for what, Ambassador? Sizak's scales flattened against his body, a sign of distress they had come to recognize. Specimens. For scientific study. You mean prisoners, Jack corrected. Survivors from other species you claimed were eliminated. At that moment, Lisa succeeded in her task. A crackling voice came through the ship's communication system, speaking in a language the universal translator struggled to process. This is Nix of the Vexari Reform Movement. The voice finally came through clearly. We've been monitoring your ship since arrival. The truth about the collective must be known. Sizak hissed in anger. Traitors have no place in these discussions. I disagree, Jack said firmly. Computer, maintain this communication channel. He turned to the screen where a younger Vexari had appeared, with lighter-colored scales and different markings than those in the diplomatic team. Some of us have opposed the expansion policy for generations, Nix explained. The collective has conquered 12 worlds by exposing other species to our biochemistry, then claiming their planets once they were naturally eliminated. Sizak rose to his feet, but Greg moved to block his path to the door. Your immunity changes everything, Nix continued. The collective cannot use their standard method of conquest against your species. In the tense silence that followed, Amy Garcia, who had been working on understanding Vexari technology, made a surprising discovery. Captain, according to these readings, the Vexari have a severe sensitivity to certain ultrasonic frequencies. Their hearing range makes them vulnerable to sounds between 50 to 55 kHz. A weakness, Jack noted, meeting Sizak's eyes. Just as all species have strengths and weaknesses. What do you want? Sizak asked, his voice tight with restraint. 3 things, Jack replied calmly. First, release of all captive species from your containment facilities. Second, formal recognition of Earth and human sovereignty. Third, a non-aggression pact that includes all species in this sector of space. The collective will never agree, Sizak argued. Then perhaps the collective needs new leadership, Jack suggested, nodding toward Nix on the screen. Someone who understands that cooperation offers more benefits than conquest. Lisa's console lit up with urgent signals. Captain, we're receiving transmissions from multiple sources on the planet. It seems Nix isn't alone in the reform movement. Jack smiled slightly. It appears we arrived at a turning point in Vexari history, Ambassador. The question is whether your people will turn toward peace or continue on a path that can only lead to conflict with humanity. Cezak looked from the humans to Nix on the screen, then back to Jack. For the first time, the confident ambassador seemed genuinely uncertain about what would happen next. 1 month later, the landscape of interstellar relations had transformed completely. The Great Hall of the Vexari Central Council was filled with representatives from 6 different species, each breathing their own custom air mixtures through specialized masks. At the center of it all stood the human delegation, the only ones who needed no protection from the Vexari atmosphere. Nix, now the provisional leader of the reformed Vexari collective, stood at the speaking platform. His lighter-colored scales gleamed under the ceremonial lights. "Today marks the beginning of the Galactic Cooperation Alliance," Nix announced. "For too long, the Vexari viewed our unique biochemistry as a weapon. Today, we recognize it as simply one evolutionary path among many." Jack Morgan, now promoted to Admiral for his historic first contact success, nodded in agreement. The Earth government had sent additional diplomatic staff, but insisted Jack remain as the primary representative given his handling of the situation. In the front row sat Hank Peterson, looking slightly uncomfortable in his formal uniform. Since the Zethra incident, he had become something of a celebrity among the Vexari. They had given him the nickname the Immortal, and young Vexari often asked for his autograph. "I just drank the blue stuff," he had complained to Jack earlier. Anyone would have done the same. But both men knew that wasn't true. Hank's casual action had changed the course of interstellar history. Dr. Miller stood with a group of scientists from Earth and various liberated species. They had discovered that humans possessed a unique enzyme in their digestive system that could break down the neurotoxins found in Zethra. This enzyme had evolved on Earth to process certain plant compounds, but coincidentally worked perfectly against the Vexari toxin. "The universe has a sense of humor," Dr. Miller had remarked when they made the discovery. The formerly imprisoned species had been released from the containment facilities. Some were able to return to their home planets, while others whose worlds had been colonized by the Vexari were offered new territories and reparations. Lisa Trent had been instrumental in establishing communication protocols between the diverse species, many of whom used completely different sensory systems. She was currently working with a floating crystalline being whose language consisted entirely of light patterns. Paul Winters had led the scientific exchange program, helping catalog the biological diversity of all involved species. His recent paper on comparative xenobiology had already become required reading at Earth universities. As the ceremony continued, Ambassador Cezak entered the hall. He had been demoted but not imprisoned, as the reform movement sought reconciliation rather than revenge. He approached Jack with formal stiffness. "Admiral Morgan," he said with the Vexari equivalent of a bow. "It seems I misjudged your species." "A common mistake in first contact situations," Jack replied diplomatically. "Still, it is unsettling to discover that one's greatest strength is ineffective," Cezak admitted. "Every species has strengths and vulnerabilities," Jack said. "The key is finding ways to complement each other rather than exploit weaknesses." As they spoke, a Vexari server approached with a tray of drinks. Jack recognized the familiar blue glow of Zethra, now served as a symbol of the new alliance. "Admiral, would you and your famous crewmen care for a ceremonial drink?" the server asked. Jack smiled and took 2 glasses, handing one to Hank, who had joined them. "You know," Hank said, swirling the blue liquid, "I've been experimenting in the ship's kitchen. Turns out Zethra makes an amazing mixer with vodka and lime juice." Cezak's scales rippled in what they now recognized as Vexari laughter. Perhaps there is a commercial opportunity there. In fact, Hank had already received offers to brand and sell Peterson's Blue Blast throughout Earth space. The drink that was deadly poison to most species, but merely tangy to humans, was becoming a sought-after Earth delicacy. As the ceremony concluded, Greg Thompson approached with news from Earth. The Colonization Committee has approved joint human-Vexuri settlements on 3 border worlds. Jack nodded with satisfaction. From potential extinction event to peaceful cooperation in just 1 month, all because one human maintenance technician had casually downed a glass of the deadliest toxin in the known galaxy. To unexpected outcomes, Jack said, raising his glass in a toast. And to differences that complement rather than threaten, Nix added. The gathered representatives raised their various drinking vessels, each filled with substances that matched their unique biochemistry. In that moment, the promise of a different kind of future spread throughout the stars.